Hello and welcome to this episode of HBCU. I'm your host, Dee Brown, CEO. Today I have a special guest host with me, Ben Baltimore II, my Chief of Staff. Joining us on the show today is Julian Miller. Julian serves as the Program Director for the Reuben V Anderson Center for Justice at Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. Julian is also a practicing attorney. Julian, welcome to HBCU.
Thank you for having me.
Man, we're glad to have you. So Julian, you have a different path to your HBCU experience. Like me, I did not graduate from an HBCU, but you took a totally different path to get into the HBCU space where you're providing a substantial amount of support and resources. So you actually attended and graduated your undergrad at Harvard University, and you went on to the University of Mississippi to receive your law degree. Now, you have been working in the area of social justice and poverty for some time now. So talk to me about how you got engaged in that area prior to Tougaloo College.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's good again to see you again, Dee, and be on this show. I'm a fifth generation Mississippi Deltan. Lived there my entire life. I was raised in a very small town, Winstonville, Mississippi, total population 199. And so where ultimately, the poverty rate would exceed over 40%. And so I was raised in a working class family. And so, I never could get away from, the circumstances of my life, but I always aspired to try to make it better. My mother ended up becoming a physician, and she instilled within me this belief that you can make a difference by keeping someone from dying when you simply don't have to. So naturally, I would want to follow in her footsteps. So I went to Math and Science High School, and I took all the math and science courses with the aspiration that I would be this great physician. But I really liked politics. I didn't know much about it, but I was interested in it. And so the idea of it is while it's so noble to keep someone dying from they don't have to, the idea of politics and public service is you can give them a life worth living. Right. So I had the opportunity to enroll in Harvard College, and I majored in government with that aspiration. And I did amazing work with the Institute of Politics. I taught politics and civics to inner city Boston youth. I wrote for the Harvard Political Review. I did co-wrote policy proposals in the areas of congressional redistricting and addressing poverty in rural areas. And so I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I wanted to actually try to put all of this great experience, from this great Harvard experience, I wanted to kind of put it to use in my community. So I went back to the Mississippi Delta at the time, and I did anti-poverty work with an organization called Dreyfus Health Foundation, who did community projects all over the world, but they had about 20 projects that they were doing, anti-poverty projects they were doing in the Delta, focused on public health, education, and economic justice. And it was, I really, of course, I had a lifelong Deltan, and had experiences, but it really was a eye-opening perspective of looking at these issues from the lens of, trying to address them on the grassroots level and realizing there are so many significant social problems in the Delta, and I had to figure out a way of how to find synergy with all these groups and to address these issues in a very substantive way. And so one of the things that I learned about that there had been a movement around food justice as a means of economic justice. Yeah. And so, you're from Mississippi Delta, you know how it is because of the mechanization of farming. At one point in the early 20th century, African Americans thrived, as farmers and growers. And so, but once you had the mechanization of farming and the expansion of corporate agri-farming, essentially put these farmers out of business. And so, and of course, rural towns like mine suffered because of it. And so, there had been a growing movement around an organization called Mississippians Engaging in Greener Agriculture. It's led by a woman named Dorothy Grady Scarborough. It was a group of local farmers from Bolivar County who were doing efforts around growing high yield produce on small plots of land and really sort of pioneering work around organic farming. And they had done this work, they started a farmer's market, and they were really trying to get into food justice space. So when I was working with Dreyfus and trying to look at how to figure out a strategic way to address all these social problems, the thought was, if you look at the market in the Delta, the food market in Delta, it's about $1.4 billion that Delta spend on food. Local farmers at that time, were capturing 0.0004% of that market. So the thought was, if you could have farmers of color actually, develop these food systems, these sustainable food systems, and capture more and more of that market, you can get revenue for the Delta, which can be used to address social problems. So it's like, that's the thing. So I committed my life to. So I worked with Dorothy Scarborough and others to co-found an organization called Delta Fresh Foods Initiative, which had the goal of developing building community food systems throughout the Delta for the purposes of capturing that market and address issues of both food justice, food insecurity, as well as public health inequities. And that really, sort of laid the foundation for my anti-poverty work, which I did for 3 years and still was doing when I'm matriculating in law school at Ole Miss.
Got you.
Wow. So Julian, I must ask, growing up in Winstonville, population 199, how did you matriculate through Harvard University?
Let me ask another question about Winstonville before you answer that question. They're not having any kids in Winstonville. It's just holding at 199.
It's dropped. It's dropped. It's like a population decline.
Okay.
Like, good gracious. I'm like, man. So yeah, it's like you moved to Winstonville. I would really suggest that they need it.
But no, go ahead.
Well, first of all, and to answer your question, Ben, by the grace of God, honestly, I had, you're from a small rural town, you watch a lot of television. So the thing where everyone wanted to go, unlike HBCUs, everybody wanted to go to Harvard. Harvard's the best college in the country, and this is, where you go and it'll change your life and all these different things. So I kind of bought into that, and I kind of worked hard, tried to work very hard, make good grades, and when that opportunity came, I took it. It wasn't until I graduated from Harvard, and I had a very transformative experience there. I finished in 3 years. I took a year off. My grandmother, who had raised me, had major surgery, so I took a year off and actually had a chance to work as a policy director for a congressional campaign. And I took that year off and I went back and I finished. And it was really an amazing experience. I realized that Harvard had challenged a lot of my values because the environment it's phenomenal, but it's unrealistic. It's not how the world works. Everything was handed on a silver platter. The world is your oyster. You can do anything, every opportunity, it's there. But that's essentially not how the world works. And it challenged every one of my values and proved on the ones I came with I was pretty much right about. and that was the best education you ever get. And so after I finished, I had to understand about, okay, I've had these great opportunities and it's given me this, but now I can invest back in my community so to make it someday at that level. And so, it's been, I could have never been where I've been without that experience, but I understood, I took the best parts of it to be able to be in a place where I can sort of transform my community.
So tell me, how do you, because you are a practicing attorney, obviously you represented me before as well.
Yes. And congratulations, hey, listen, it all worked out.
Thank you for your role.
You're welcome.
but and you are a very good attorney, but the work that you're doing at Tougaloo College, I think transcends financial gain because, obviously people do not get into education for the money. I mean, I think that's pretty, straightforward. And so talk to me about, what inspired you to go to Tougaloo College and be part of creating this program, the Reuben V Anderson Center for Justice.
Oh, man. And it's funny, my experience with Tougaloo was very unique. Oddly enough, it began after I finished at Harvard and I started doing anti-poverty work. My baby brother, LeBroderick, he got accepted to Tougaloo College. And he enrolled, and so I was very concerned about his transitioning into college, and would this be a good opportunity for him, and would he become the man he needed to be, and be able to translate the dreams of a boy into the destiny of a man and go through that process. And I knew I wanted to support him through that process, but I was really concerned about this environment. So I was grateful for that time I could be at home and be with him and visit him. And what I learned is he just thrived at the Tougaloo experience. It was they treated him like family. He had these amazing opportunities. He had this loving environment that not only made him a better man, but also gave him extraordinary professional opportunities. And I learned a lot. And I was blown away. And that experience meant so much to me. And to the point where I visit Tougaloo often, to check on him. His friends became like my siblings, surrogate siblings. And so much so, and just digress a little bit, so much so that I had visited Tougaloo so often, when I came back for my interview for faculty position, the security guy was like, "Hey man, how you doing? It's good to see you. Your brother, I thought your brother graduated years ago." And still knew who I was. It's crazy. Yeah. And so that really touched me. And so, little to know, God is funny in how he works and what he sort of reveals to us about his perfect plan. That was, I appreciate Tougaloo for the experience what it did for my brother. I had no idea, though, I would end up, in that position to be able to sort of give back in the way for it did for me. But fast forward to when I started practicing law, I was with Butler Snow. One of the first major cases I got was a case with representing the Department of Education in the state's first test cheating scandal. And the chief lawyer of the Department of Education at that time was a lady by the name of Raina Anderson. And come to find out, Raina Anderson was the daughter of Reuben Anderson, who was probably one of the most infamous, one of the most famous, and one of the most auspicious Tougaloo alumni that ever graduated. He had the distinction of being the first African American. Once he finished Tougaloo, he was the first African American graduate of the University of Mississippi School of Law. He went on to be a prodigious civil rights lawyer who literally worked with at the time he was worked with NAACP to Legal Defense Fund to integrate almost every school in the state of Mississippi. He went on to become the first African American county court, circuit court judge, circuit court judge, and Mississippi Supreme Court justice. Right. Became the first African American president of the Mississippi Bar, and just loved Mississippi. He was just philanthropic, and again, really because Tougaloo has a strong legacy of social justice. And so he came about in the civil rights movement. And so he sort of embodied these transformative figures who took their education and built a great life for themselves, but really had an ethos of trying to transform the community around him. And he would tell you his first loves are God, family, Tougaloo. And so he wanted his legacy, he wanted Tougaloo students to be trained in that same mode of being able to do good, but also to do good, but do well. And so I had the opportunity to meet his daughter, who was a phenomenal education lawyer, had a chance to work with her intimately on these cases traveling the state, and we built a friendship from that. And so the idea of it was was still doing my anti-poverty work with Delta Fresh Foods had grown, but was thinking about, well, how do we make this work statewide? And sure enough, Raina, who Justice Anderson would tell you is his greatest legacy, was trying to think about how to take her father's legacy next level to make it statewide. And so we together worked and decided we founded, with Justice Anderson's, of course, support, founded the Reuben V Anderson Center for Justice nonprofit. So
you said something along the way there that when you went back to Tougaloo to interview, that the person that was in his
security guard,
the security guard still remembered you. And so that kind of go back to I think the fabric of that HBCU experience. So I'm going to just hold you right there and pivot to you, Ben. You attended 2 HBCUs.
Correct.
Coahoma Community College.
Correct.
And Tuskegee University, right? So talk to me about your experience on those campuses.
Well, my experiences at both Coahoma and Tuskegee were experiences of family. I felt like all of my professors, even like he said, the janitors, coaches, everyone makes you feel at home, whether I was at a community college, which Coahoma Community College is a community college, and, as well as Tuskegee, which is a private university. I always felt, I never felt out of place at a HBCU. I never felt like there was anything that I needed that I could not get. And it's just an amazing experience. Now, the number one thing about the HBCU experience is, of course, the football games and homecomings. And maybe the number two to me, but number one to others is probably the band. Absolutely.
No, so talk to me about homecoming, because I know that Coahoma Community College has probably one of the largest community college homecomings probably in the country.
Right.
It'll rival most four-year institutions. It surpasses most four-year institutions. Talk to me about that experience.
Well, I doubled in college. I doubled as a promoter, and I'll just tell you, every year around homecoming, I would bring about 2,000 people out. So if there's any indication of how fun homecoming was, homecoming, the population of my town is probably 2,000. I'm joking, but honestly, homecoming is pretty big, as well as at Tuskegee. Yeah. Tuskegee is a private school, but it's just like Tougaloo, where everyone feels like family and everyone comes home for homecoming.
Absolutely. So Julian, I want to pivot back to you and talk about the Reuben V. Anderson Center for Justice. Tell me about that.
Of course. So the idea with the Anderson Center, when it was conceived by Raina, the idea is we didn't want to duplicate work that had already been done. Of course, Mississippi is the poorest state in the country. And so there's a significant number of anti-poverty organizations that already do work that have made some strides. People working on the ground in the community, as I discovered in my organizing 15 years ago, who are making strides, just need resources. So doing great work that can be transformative, but just lack resources and institutional support. So the idea of it was with the Anderson Center was to figure out how do we build synergy around organizations and institutions doing this work to make the work systemic. So we focused on 4 areas: economic justice, criminal justice equity, public health equity, and educational equity. And so we wanted to model the center after the MacArthur Justice Center, which is, MacArthur Justice Center is a national nonprofit that partners with law schools to address, to work in impact litigation policy to address issues in the criminal justice system. And so we wanted to take that same model with Mississippi institutions. So oddly enough, before we got to Tougaloo, the first project we did was with Mississippi College School of Law. We started a education law and policy clinic where we represented low-income students of color, 96% of them black. My clients are black males in school disciplinary matters, youth court matters, and special education matters throughout the state, as well as doing impact litigation and policy on issues of educational equity. Oddly enough, the Dean Patricia Bennett, at the time, who was a Tougaloo alumnus, was the dean at MC Law who helped us shepherd that through to start that clinic. And so, but obviously the centerpiece of the work was going to be Tougaloo College. Now, oddly enough, I had no plans to get on faculty. I was just part of the center. I was like, well, I'll just work with whomever, because Justice Anderson already had a pre-law program in his name at Tougaloo College. Reuben V Anderson pre-law program, which since 1993, had by that time graduated about 180 lawyers across the country from that program. So the idea was I would work with that program director to help, begin to establish the programming through the center at Tougaloo College. Well, I'll never forget it. I literally was about to, I had my little list of sticky notes, and I was literally about to pick up the phone to call the pre-law director to, let him know, try to schedule a meeting so we can discuss it. And I pulled up an article, and he had finally left the position to be the city attorney for City of Jackson. So I called Rainer. I said, Rainer? I said, so the other guy, the pre-law director, of course, has left. And I don't really want to kind of drag this out, while we've got momentum. Justice Anderson made it clear we need to kind of get this done. I said, well, I would, I can get on faculty. And at the time, I had a full-time law practice. Yeah. And she's like, and she said the question, I was like, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's like, it couldn't, how hard could it be? And so the position opened, and I applied for the position, and I started in March 2019, and it was very eye-opening. This was my first time, because I already started teaching MC Law, teaching the clinic. And working with undergraduates, it was really, just such an eye-opening experience, and really because I had to both to transition the program to get it sort of, solid and sustainable, and making sure it serves the needs of the kids, and then begin this process of working at the time, Dr. Daphne Chamberlain, who was my dean, who is a brilliant civil rights activist and historian, who at the time already, and we met through her brother, who's a Tougaloo alumnus who worked at Butler Snow. It's just all, it's all fate. Right. And so she had already been sort of trying to look at a work around building an institute, a social justice institute at Tougaloo, around looking at curriculum and making sure that the curriculum reflected social justice and racial issues as it should. And so we were already in sync. It was all, all God's plan, all fate. And so it was a huge transition, but one of the things I learned in that experience was going through the experience with my brother was basically treating them the same way. I knew how much it meant to me, to be in that experience for him, and what it meant to me for Tougaloo. Loved and nurtured and supported him as much as I could, as much as I wanted to. So give that same back in these students and invest in them in that same way. And I was grateful to have that ethos, but also work with Dr. Charles Holmes, who was the founding pre-law director of both Tougaloo College and the founding pre-law director of Jackson State University, who probably has educated and mentored more successful black lawyers probably than anybody in history. I literally.
That lead me to a separate question. Because you've had a diverse experience. I mean, in terms of educationally, you attended 2 PWIs and arguably one of the most prestigious, institutions in the country. What do you see as far as the fundamental differences between a student at Harvard and what they get out of that experience versus a student that's attending Tougaloo?
Well, let me say this. In being on faculty, directing the Anderson Institute and doing the work with the students, it has given me and let me say this, I work with phenomenal colleagues, especially lawyers, who are outstanding, who are TU alumni, who are outstanding. So I never was one of those people who had this perception, that, my experience being at the PWI, some of the PWI is much more qualified than HBCU, because that's just not, that wasn't borne out by the evidence in my professional experience with people. So first of all, I never had that ethos. But I grew to respect HBCU students, especially students at Tougaloo, more than anyone, because look, I was essentially spoiled through my Harvard experience. Harvard is built for, again, it's ultimately built to, it gives you you are a consumer of a great educational experience, and the world is your oyster, and you're spoiled through that process. What I respected about Tougaloo students is they could get to the same level as a Harvard student, but it took much more as far as dealing with that day-to-day experience at HBCU, of working, of trying to support themselves financially, of everything that it took, and they turned out just as competitive with anyone who got, something like me, who got spoiled through a Harvard degree. And so it made me respect and admire them more, and it motivated me more to invest in them, to try to replicate the experiences in my program at the level of a PWI, at the level of a Harvard, to make it easier for them to be successful.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to my question, Julian. I went, just like Mr. Brown said, I matriculated through two HBCUs, and there I noticed, there we had at both schools we had a slogan, the HBCU struggle. If you're talking to someone from Winstonville who's looking, to make their transition to college, what would you tell them about, what advice would you give them about which route to take?
Oh man, that's a cool one. Well, first of all, I definitely encourage you to come to Tougaloo. I have all the faith in the world, and I seriously say this, and I say this honestly to my parents. I would put the work we do at the Anderson Institute and our pre-law program, our public policy program, and our leadership development program against any program in the country. And I say that honestly because, like with our pre-law program, for example, our students, we revamped the curriculum so they could be prepared for law school, so they could literally, it's a microcosm of the law school experience, because law school is a totally different way of studying and thinking. We train them in that. They get high-level internships with everything from, they're working with the Innocence Project and the Center for Investigative Reporting to look at cold cases, doing research around cold cases, looking at issues of the criminal justice system. They are, I have a partnership with my firm where they do many internship and get mentorship and support. They intern in major, with the courts, with government entities. We have a public policy program, which as part of the Anderson Institute, where our students, our top economic student, we just published a white paper looking at establishing a state earned income tax credit in Mississippi, doing a pilot project that we're going to do with the Department of Human Services. We are developing a food system on campus. My brother co-founded with me a Tougaloo Ag Growth Initiative to develop a food system on the campus where we're paying living wages to the students to build it as a worker-owned cooperative. I mean, these kids, we have an educational equity project where they're working with an organization called Greater Jackson Arts Council to provide after-school mentorships, after-school enrichment and mentorships to JPS middle school students that we're using to as a means of studying policy around universal after-school programs as part of the public school system. Our kids, we just completed the Ben G. Thompson Leadership Development Program, where our students worked with organizers in the Delta to do community and economic development projects and did qualitative and quantitative research looking at these projects to make policy recommendations for the Farm Bill, which they just submitted at the end of the year to the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Policy Center at Alcorn. So they do high-level transformational work on the ground as students, yet get this amazing educational experience where they have a director and they have phenomenal professors who love them and nurture them and motivate them and take a vested interest in them to want to see them succeed, to both do well and also do good.
Okay, so in other words, what you're telling me is that it's best to choose an HBCU over Harvard.
Oh, no, you
well, let me take that in a different direction. The reality is that there's only going to be a very small fraction of students, not to mention students of color, that are going to be accepted into a Harvard or an Ivy League program. And so HBCUs, when you run it up against Harvard, the odds of you having those two options are going to be much greater in terms of you getting into an HBCU. I think where the significant difference that I hear Julian say is that a lot of our students of color have all types of challenges, food insecurity being one, social justice being one, and so the work they're doing at Tougaloo is really advancing the fight against those particular matters. And so, Julian, I want to say this. I think that it was important to bring you on the show and highlight the work you're doing at Tougaloo for one very important reason. Everyone that's in this fight to advance HBCUs have not attended HBCUs. Some of those individuals have gone on to lead HBCUs. Some are making significant investments in HBCUs. And so what I recognize is that as a Harvard-trained lawyer who went to the University of Mississippi and received your law degree, that you could operate anywhere in the world. And you chose to bring your talent back to the state of Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta, and invest your time, your resources, your knowledge and experience in advancing the cause. And sometimes that's just as important as actually attending the institution, because you do get equipped with things that you can bring back, and you have case studies that you can prove your model with. And so for the work that you have done in advancing the causes of HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, I want to award you with the HBCU Lifetime Achievement Award. And we really appreciate you. We appreciate you coming to be on the show. To my viewers, thank you for watching. I appreciate each of you. And remember, without you, there's no me.